Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fish and Game Commission meeting of October 11th and 12th in Atascadero. Sherry, may we have a roll call, please?
President Sklar?
Here.
Vice President Hostler-Comerson? Here. Commissioner Williams?
Here.
Commissioner Burns? Commissioner Silva?
Here.
Great. We have a quorum. Thank you, Sherry.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Valerie Termini, and I'm the Executive Director of the Fish and Game Commission. From the department, we have the Director of the Department of Fish and Wildlife, Chuck Bonham. We have Stafford Lair, the Deputy Director. And we have Wendy Bogdan, General Counsel. We have David Best, the Chief of Law Enforcement. We have Kevin Schaefer, the Fisheries Branch Chief. We have Kari Lewis, who is the Wildlife Branch Chief. And tomorrow we'll have the Marine Region staff. This is the 147th year of continuous operation of the California Fish and Game Commission in partnership with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Our goal today is informed decision-making regarding California's natural resources. Together with your participation, commission meetings are vital in achieving the stewardship of our natural resources. In that spirit, please listen to the following information to make these meetings as efficient as possible. The commission meeting is scheduled over 2 days. Today we'll deal with wildlife items today, while tomorrow's will focus on ocean and marine items. We are operating under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, and those proceedings are being recorded and broadcast via CalSpan. You can find meeting materials and the streaming of the meeting at our website at fgc.ca.gov.
Our first item on the agenda for discussion today is item 2, Public Forum. Public Forum is an opportunity to speak on items not on the agenda. Sherry, how many speakers do we have on item 2?
Brian Gurrell, Patricia Mcpherson, Kathy Knight, Noel Kremers.
Great, thank you. Please come on up and speak. Each speaker will have 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Brian Gurrell. I'm 34. I'm born and raised in Monterey, California. I'm currently an active South Central Nearshore non-trap endorsed permit holder, and I fish primarily in Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary. I'm a newer permittee, and being that I've been fishing under my own permit since 2012. I'm here to request that the Commission would please consider adding additional trap endorsements for the region of the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary, South Central California, to the meeting agenda.
You know, this is an item that's on our agenda for today. Just judging from what's the label on your sign is, we would appreciate if you'd speak to it at that time.
Oh, well, this is a kind of a different aspect. I mean,
Well,
it's not about that.
If it's about, okay, well, tell go.
I just wanted to use this time to introduce the speakers that are here today, just to give you some background on us.
Yeah, but again, if it's on the Ballona Wetlands, that's on the agenda later, and we'll talk about it.
I thought that was on the DEIR.
That's on it's on the topic of that.
We're just here to, I just want to introduce ourselves.
Again, we'll ask you to come up during the agenda item. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Patricia Mcpherson. I am here representing Grassroots Coalition. I'm also representing the Sierra Club, and I'd like to give you some background regarding the Playa Vista site. The Playa Vista site encompassed everything essentially from the 405 to the beach area, and it no longer does, because the groups that are here today to speak to you are the groups that provided for a willing seller, that being Playa Capital LLC. And the main reason for that was we've spent over the past 20 years working to illuminate the issues there and working with the City of Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety regarding a lot of the environmental hazards that are in that area. Namely, we have a willing seller.
Just ask for clarification.
Yeah.
What's the issue here? What's the topic?
This is public comment.
On what are you talking about?
Who I am.
What are you discussing? I'm not.
I'm discussing the City of Los Angeles at the moment and the methane code.
It's not clear to me what the relevance is to the Fish and Game Commission, and it's not clear to us what you're talking about. Could you tell us what the topic is you want to talk about specifically?
Protecting the health and safety of the environment, including wildlife.
Okay, go on. We'll give you a little more time, but it's not really clear what the topic is, but go ahead.
Well, as I understand it, and am I on the clock right now?
You are.
Because you are taking up my time on the clock right now. And the concern is that we have health and safety issues that are related to the environment, to wildlife species, and I'm giving a blanket approach to that because this affects all of Los Angeles, and you have, for some reason, interrupted my discussion of that and how serious an issue oil field gases are and the contaminants of BTEX gases and hydrogen sulfide.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. That helps us understand what the issue is, because that's not an issue that this commission deals with.
It is, actually.
We don't have authority over drilling and
That's not what my comments regard. My comments regard paying attention to the aspects of Prop 65 gases as it relates to wildlife. And this is an issue that does affect wildlife and does need to be addressed regarding the health and safety and procreation of species that are in habitats such as this. And I'm simply trying to give you some background as to who we are. And I don't understand what the resistance is, actually I do, to learning who we are and what we have been about for over the past 20 years. We are people that have given up our careers to address these issues on a volunteer basis. So, and I am simply trying to let you know who we are, and you are resisting even learning who we are during public comment. As I understand
with all due respect, we're trying to understand, and we're really having a hard time understanding the relevance to what we're here for. But go on. We'll give you another 30 seconds.
Can I ask a question, too?
You may. Vice President Hassel-Carmenson.
Thank you. Just, if you would, take a deep breath and know that we are not putting you in a defensive position.
That's how I feel.
I know, and I would like you to take a deep breath and take a step back from that defensive position. Again, repeat the name of the group you represent.
I'm here representing Grassroots Coalition, and I am
Grassroots
here
Coalition.
representing the Sierra Club.
Okay. And the issue you're bringing before us is the effects.
This is simply public comment, and
I
I am
understand.
trying to let you know who we are and our standing in the
Right.
community, which you may look at Sierra Club and know who they are,
No.
but I dare say you don't know who Grassroots
That-
Coalition is.
That's excellent. We've identified that. Now, if you can just, and I believe the President will give you additional time, succinctly describe the issue that you would like us to hear.
Yeah, I'll give you some more time. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. This is an issue, what I was just describing, our role working with the City of Los Angeles. Grassroots Coalition was instrumental in garnering a new citywide methane code, a new code for the Playa Vista area, which is called the Playa Vista Methane Prevention, Detection, and Monitoring Program. That's an experimental program. All of this leads into our work with the California Public Utilities Commission and issues regarding SoCal Gas. And I wanted to let you know also that David Sue from the Department of Building and Safety set precedent in the city of Los Angeles by going outside the city because of the highly politicized atmosphere regarding the Playa Vista site and Playa Capital, LLC, which is Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter, Goldman Sachs, so on and so forth, all of whom, through these years, has tried to marginalize the aspects of the oil field gases throughout the region. And yet we have been able to get a new methane code. Playa Vista has its very own code. And I would like to also get back to something that you had asked me, and it's slipping my mind because you're very right. I do feel that I'm in a hostile environment here because I don't feel that you simply want to know who we are. My understanding through over 20 years of speaking during public comment is to just let you know who we are. If we are not allowed to speak on the topic, which is later today, on Ballona, which we will have a very limited amount of time, my concern is process. I notice that you have an invitation today. That invitation invites people to come and speak with you, discuss things with you. Regarding the issues that will be heard later today, we've never had that opportunity with the Department of Fish and Game. We have never had that opportunity with this commission. So while some of these things overlap, and I could identify how Ballona interfaces with those things, Grassroots Coalition, if I'm not allowed to bring up the word Ballona, I am here to say we have never been allowed any time to discuss. I have written the director again and again and again, asking for time to sit down and discuss issues. And I have never been allowed to discuss issues. Never had the ability to have any frank conversation.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, but thank you. We've heard, we know who you are, and we look forward to hearing from you more on the wetlands issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee. And before I ask our Executive Director to talk about the Tribal Committee and as well as Vice President Coster-Carmerson, I want to take a moment to celebrate the Governor having signed and the Legislature having passed SB 161, which establishes our Tribal Committee in code and will make it a permanent feature. Vice President Coster-Carmerson has been an amazing leader on this effort, establishing the committee in the first place, to making this committee a very relevant and integral part of the work we do, bringing tribes throughout California to the table to talk about issues of concern to them and concern to the state. And so I just think it's really worth celebrating that the committee is now a permanent part of our commission. Thank you for all your great work, Jackie.
Thank you, President Sklar and everyone. I would also like to thank some people, especially Senator McGuire, who was our sponsor for the legislation, and Governor Brown. Additionally, without the hard work of the tribes, the tribal leaders, and our executive director, Valerie Tremini, none of this would have happened. So I really want to reiterate that it has been a collaborative effort. So thank you, everyone. And we're excited. We had a great meeting yesterday. We had some very good dialogue. This is really historic. So the tribes having that forum for dialogue, discussion, and questions has just really been beneficial.
I want to make one point that's very important. This is not an opportunity to make official comment on the draft EIR or the environmental impact statement, because this is not a hearing on that. There's an opportunity to do that on November 8th in Marina Del Rey. So any comments here will not enter into that official record. You need to do that through that official process of submitting to that on the EIR. So, and Val, do you want to add to that?
A few notes. Your lawyer and I like to comment on these things. So they can make comments on the draft
Yeah, they
EIR.
can.
They're just not formalized at
Right.
this point. Mike?
President Sklar, if I may also, I just would also like to point out that the Commission's had a lot to do with Ballona over the last year or so, and there are several regulatory petitions at different stages before the Commission. And without going into too much detail, unless you want me to give you a refresher, I just wanted to point out that those aren't the subject of this agenda item. This agenda item was born out of that action on one of the previous ones where the Commission had asked for follow-up. And so for Bagley-Keene purposes, it doesn't include discussion of those reg petitions.
And we have about 11 or 12 speakers on this. We're going to have 2 speakers who've been granted additional time, 5 minutes each. We'll then go on to the rest of the speakers. There's 2 parts to this, but I'm going to ask all the speakers to come up on the whole topic of 11 at one time, because some people put down one, some put the other, some put both. We're hearing it all as one, so we'll let all the speakers on 11 speak it in a row, and then we'll have commission discussion on it. Additionally, we're going to allow Director Bonham to speak to it as well before Patricia Mcpherson and Walter Lamb are given their 5 minutes each. With that, Erin, please introduce this.
Well, you guys covered most of what I was planning to introduce, so thank
Sorry.
you. You streamlined that for me. But again, as a reminder, this is a discussion that came out of consideration of a previous petition related to parking at Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. So today, the department will be providing an update on the Ecological Reserve, focusing in 2 areas, which is the County of Los Angeles parking leases and the draft environmental impact statement, environmental impact report that was released in late September. And with that, I will turn it over to Director Bonham.
Perfect. I'm thankful the department will do its update first. That's most appropriate for then the public speakers to have heard that before they come up to the podium.
Absolutely.
So thanks for structuring it that way. Hey, so I'm going to adopt the Vice President's advice from the beginning of this morning that we each kind of take a deep breath. And, I'm thankful Californians are passionate about these issues, right? It would be a way worse situation if nobody had any passion about our ecosystems. but I also think we can be nice about it with each other, right? And we don't always have to assume the worst in each other when you get in a passionate discussion about what to do or not to do. And I know our staff really care about Ballona. And often they're just looking for a thank you for doing a hard job in a difficult situation. And my guess, having come from the environmental community, it can feel the same in the advocacy world. So I would thank the speakers, not knowing who they are, for their passion to a special place, whether we disagree or not. All right, so as y'all know, this is a unique property. The department was given this property with a lot of history behind it. And this particular place on our coastline looks a lot different than it did in the past. And in the past, you'll see it written, maybe it was 2,000 plus acres from Playa del Rey to Venice, inland to Baldwin Hills. And because his son's name came up earlier, I think son might have been grandson, you can actually go back to 1898 and see that George Bird Grinnell wrote a lot about what he called the Venice Marshes, which was this overall complex, right? But by the mid-1940s, this particular area really had been reduced in scale and extent and also in its ecological function through a variety of things. Loss of a lot of the tidal saltwater marsh, a lot of the freshwater marsh. And as of today, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, I think, considers all the wetlands within our reserve complex as impaired and considers some of them as the most degraded in the state. So you can kind of track over time the change condition. And one of the most notable changes was in the 60s, to create Marina, the harbor there, they extracted about 3 million cubic yards of fill and put it on parts of the reserve that we now have. And, 3 million cubic yards, I think if you lay that out linearly, is probably, maybe it's from LA to Mobile, Alabama, right? So you're not really going to ever go back to what it might have been 200 years ago. You've got a lot of infrastructure moving around. You've got big boulevards. You have a creek, which used to have a historical meander, Ballona Creek. Now basically is a straight shot, if this is a word, concretized, right? It's just a concrete, straight delivery system out to the ocean. And you've got people living around it, right? Westchester, Marina del Rey, Playa Vista. So this is the update part around the environmental document, right? So since I think many of the advocates fought for preservation and acquisition was done, I think there's been an unfulfilled promise that we were going to head towards restoration, we were going to produce these environmental documents, and they took too long. I'll acknowledge that. So we're at a moment where we've produced a public draft environmental impact report, and the lead agency on the federal front is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They've produced their companion environmental impact statement. That happened September 25th, and the two agencies announced a 60-day review period. It's very common that we'll receive requests for extensions. 60 days, I think, lands right before Thanksgiving, like November 24th. So we're deliberating on extensions, and when we make a decision, we'll let the public know. We understand the rationale for extensions. So the document, I think, is a good piece of work. Broadly speaking, if I had to channel the department's kind of vision looking forward, Angelinos used to hunt and fish and swim and have access to this property. Or not this property, but this area, and they no longer have that access. And they certainly can't hunt, fish, and see what used to be there. So if I had to kind of articulate the vision, at least we have, there's an element of like reconnecting the land to the creek, all of that to the sea. There's also an element of kind of bringing people back new gateways, new trails, understanding you've also got to analyze potential impact from that recreational improvement. I think we very much want to bring back species that haven't been there in a long time, that are our actual threatened and endangered species. And if you look at the core purpose of ecological reserves, they're for those threatened and endangered species. That's why we have reserves around the state. There's also an element of our vision which is like recreating an ecological function, the physical processes that you need under your landscape to support diversity of species assemblage. I think there's an aspect, it's much smaller, of like local economy and relationship to the people that, you know, call this place home. So we have 4 alternatives in the document. And as a rough matter, they kind of range in scale of intensity of restoration and size of restoration. From full tidal restoration, which is the proposed action. Now, importantly, that's not a preferred alternative because that selection happens after the public process, but it's the proposed. That's the larger, more intensive restoration. Another alternative is kind of a restored partial creek sinuosity. And then the least restorative is a levee culvert and oxbow alternative. And then we have a 4th no action alternative. So we've laid out a range. And we identified 7 California Environmental Equality Act objectives, which the department's trying to achieve through an ultimate alternative. And those are restore and enhance habitats, restore, enhance, protect cultural resources, the tribal connection, recreate these natural ecological functions, facilitate recreation and education, avoid infrastructure impacts. And here, I mean, we've got roads running around and people, so you've got to have that as an objective, I think. We also have as the 6th objective, memorializing a better long-term management and financing structure. It's a difficult property to do right by from like a management and capital cost angle. And then lastly, no adverse flood control impact. So these alternatives are talking about in varying forms kind of unleashing that creek, if you will, in a way that allows it to reconnect in a historical fashion. To get to a good spot with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we had to have as an objective no lessening of flood control protection, right? So there's a lot of hydrologic modeling in the report that's been put out that ran 100-year flood and 500-year flood events. And unless we could show any of these restorative ideas would, not lessen flood control, we really wouldn't have gotten there with the Corps. So that's an objective. That's the CEQA document. Those that are going to comment on the CEQA document today, its infirmities or not, I would encourage you to put that comment in writing and submit it to the department and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That's the way any proponent, make sure their comments are reflected in the administrative record, and they need to do that. They need to not rely exclusively on their comments to you today. All right, so let's shift gears. Within that effort, which will probably play out in a rough timeline, November, or if there's an extension, public comment period in the end of 18, then typically you see the lead agencies take a period of time for response to comments. You've got to articulate everything that's come in and then how you answer that. Then you'll move to the lead agencies selecting an alternative and certifying a document. And my hope is that we'll complete all of those steps while I'm still director, which at the outer end is, the Brown administration, so the fall of basically a year from now. Some of that depends on volume of comments and how you manage it. All right, so within this idea of restoration and the CEQA document, other parties have raised more specific issues, which it's difficult to understand whether the interest is a connection to the bigger picture or it's to bifurcate and tackle some of these smaller issues on the same timeline. That's a little unclear to me. But an issue that has come up is leasing for parking on the property at a currently existing parking lot, okay? So I think my responsibility is to give you an update from the August 16th meeting, and if you look at the video, I think it's at the 1 hour, 14 minute, 30-second mark, where I said I'd come back after having looked at a couple of like benchmark questions. You may hear more questions raised in the public speaking after me. That has been a challenge here, understanding the whole suite of everything people are asking about, right? But I'm going to try to answer the fundamental questions I think I said I'd come back on. So does the lease allow the county to sublease to another entity? It's a 1995 lease. It does prohibit subleasing or licensing unless the department allows it. And I think that's lease section 9.01 and 9.02. We inherited this lease when we got this whole package, if you will. We're currently in the process of updating the lease. It's possible the updated lease could continue this prohibition unless allowed. We're allowing this practice right now. And my personal view is, I think there's a way to sync up like discussions on lease renewal with the stuff you're going to hear about parking garage or not, and kind of put it into that timeline either in parallel or kind of synergize with that CEQA timeline that's ahead, right?
Director, can I just ask you, is there any qualification on that right to approve or deny a sublease? Is it with reasonableness or is it in sole discretion?
I don't believe without looking there's a reasonableness aspect, but you will see that the current lease allows this use of the current law by the county for employees, staffs, and I actually think it says patrons, which is an odd term I don't often see currently, but patron, I mean, definition includes commercial use, right? Other definitions are like donors or supporters, but patron seems to capture the idea that activities going on at the wharf, which is across the street, have an ability to use some of those spots. Now, of course, I think others will acknowledge many of those spots, I don't know if it's most, are related to the sheriffs and like the harbor, which is a good relationship. As best I can tell, the dispute that's being presented to you is more about this sub-aspect, right? And paying customers of commercial enterprises using portions of the lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so it appears to me the current lease allows for this if the department approves, and that it runs to employees, staff, and patrons. We need to update that lease, and we're going to do that. It also appears to me that if you look at the coastal development permit, which is from December 16th of 1988, and the number is 5-88-593, that the CDP from the Coastal Commission allows the county to charge related to the use of those spots. Now, that may be disputed in some eyes, but that's what we think when we go look at the CDP. All right, so that's kind of the leasing and parking thing. We've heard others say that, you know, it's inappropriate for a variety of reasons, and, you know, their arguments will speak for themselves. I will tell you that as best we can tell when we look at it, maybe the county's collecting about $2,000, $3,000 a year and kind of charging related to some of that lot use. I think it's also true the county's probably spending $13,000 a year on maintenance and is probably doing about another $10,000 a year of assistance on just cleaning up and kind of the property overall. So they appear to be putting more investment into this kind of delicate relationship we have with them about the property than they're, you know, extracting, if you will, through charging for use of some of those parking spots.
Director Bonham, the lease itself is between the state and the county is a nominal amount, right? It's
Yes.
like $1 a year or
Yeah.
something like that? Okay.
So if you move over to the CEQA front, some of the questions that have also come up that kind of conflate what we do on CEQA to what's the future of parking, right? It is accurate to say that the alternatives we've described in the environmental document do include the concept of a 3-story parking garage in a corner of the existing lot across from the wharf. But it's also true that the no action alternative mentions, or doesn't mention parking garage, so you've got a bookend of potential ranges. We believe that that's a sufficient range, and we can do restoration and no garage based on the alternatives that are presented to the public. No garage is actually no change to the environment. CEQA actually requires you to analyze changes to the environment, right? So, in summary, I'm thankful for the passion that's related to this parcel and property. It's not what it once was. It's been a long history. We think we're getting to the moment of fulfilling the promise about restoration by finally having produced a public document. Take a deep breath, make sure you get your comments on the record, and then the department's going to have to go through the subsequent process to figure out the right alternative and certify a final approach. And that's going to take a good portion of next year. So,
Please, thank you, Director. Commissioner, Vice President Hosser-Carmson.
Director, remind me how many existing parking places there are in the existing structure?
I know that a couple of the speakers have that memorized. I think it's in the 200. I actually don't have off the top of my head the precise number. So
Thank you.
the actual striped spaces, I think is in that range. And I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong.
Please, of course.
For you, President Sklar, this agenda item came out of the last meeting, and I was absent at that last meeting. It was my understanding the commission requested an update from the department on the leases and the draft DEIR, which the director has done. And we are expecting a special presentation. Are you going to allow general comments regarding the wetlands that are not specific to those items today?
It's a great question. This is so complicated because of the multiple things that are going on. We're specifically responding to a request among commissioners to get more information about this. I'm not going to limit the public too much in terms of what they can say. I do want to talk about a couple of ground rules after the first 3 presentations. But we just want to emphasize that just because you spoke here, that doesn't mean it's in the record for the DEIR. That's very important for your process if you want to put a stake in the ground on something very specific, but we'll keep it pretty loose.
Okay, I just wanted that clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
So please, Director.
I'm amenable to, at your discretion, continuing to provide, updates. Like an obvious moment on the EIR front is when public comment is closed and I can reflect on the scope of the type of input, those kinds of moments. And I would predict that some of the advocates want to keep talking to you about the leasing issue along the way. So at your discretion, unlike prior directors, I tend to come to most of your commission meetings, and I'm glad to keep giving an update.
Great, we appreciate that. We appreciate your heavy involvement in our process. Thank you. So we have 2 speakers who've asked to present. The first is Patricia Mcpherson. I'd ask her to come up now. Each of these speakers is going to be given 5 minutes, and then we do have one speaker who's going to represent several other speakers. I'll get to that after Ms. Mcpherson and Mr. Lamb. Welcome again. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Patricia Mcpherson, Grassroots Coalition and Sierra Club. And they may throw an image up on here I'd like you to see, and I'd like to address Mr. Bonham's comments first, and then follow along with what I've given to all of you, please. Number one, as you can see in front of you and on screen, under the word Santa Monica Bay there, those are all freshwater waters that have ponded up onto Ballona Wetlands. This is a predominantly seasonal freshwater wetland. And when Mr. Bonham has, as he's discussed, a lot of history, which I would also say is a lot of baggage given over to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, of which we would like to be able to discuss with you, because we do have history. We have not just passion. We have facts. We've created codes, ordinance in the city of Los Angeles regarding this site. The developer of Playa Vista sold the land because he was unable to develop the land due to the oil field gas issues there. So just by way of segue into the DEIR actually says the Exploration Technologies report was done for the Playa Vista site adjacent to the project. Well, the Playa Vista project is all of Ballona at the time that study was done. So it's very false and misleading to have that statement in a DEIR, and it should not do that sort of thing. In the paper that I've given you, I detail all of that, because while we thought we were coming here today to discuss the issues that you just brought up in a general way, we've been slammed with a DEIR. The Grassroots Coalition certainly feels is deficient in every way, and we can cite and show every fallacy, every misstatement, every misleading element of it. But why I have this information up on here for you to see is the director has characterized this area as does the DEIR when it says even railroad berms interfered with the tidal flow. That's absolutely false. It's absolutely false because the ocean does not connect with this site on a regular basis, but for thousands of years ago. And the alternatives that they have provide no freshwater seasonal alternatives. The last alternative that they call the do-nothing is not, well, for us in any case, for myself, is not a do-nothing alternative. We have 2 Cal EPA investigations ongoing right now that have to do with the diversion of water by the Playa Vista site itself, whose own EIR stated they will bring the fresh waters to the surface, cleanse them, reuse them on site to recharge all of the underlying aquifers. They have not done that. We have a Coastal Commission investigation into that, stating that they need to have a CDP, coastal development permit, in order to do that kind of diversion. It's illegal to do that. Under Porter Cologne, it is illegal to harm the freshwater aquifers that underlie the site, which is all present in the Poland report, warning, who is the grandfather of hydrology studies, which, by the way, no hydrology study has been done of Ballona itself. Within that DEIR, there is no information for you to be able to track the water levels of the site and what has happened since the time that Playa Vista has taken over the site. And I bring up Playa Vista because what we're seeing here for the alternatives that have been planned, and when I said baggage, I mean undue influence and conflict of interest. Virtually every one of the consultants involved in this DEIR are either consultants for the SoCalGas or Playa Vista, Playa Capital LLC, which is why earlier I said to you the City of Los Angeles actually went outside this state to bring in a consultant to try and get rid of the conflict of interest in doing the gas studies that were done across the site. Travis Longcore was actually paid, Dr. Longcore was paid to do the historical ecology of the Ballona Creek watershed. This is his comment. In the case of the Ballona Wetlands, it can help decision makers to understand that the current proposals are not restorations. And mind you, that is what the public paid for, over $140 million, which I gave you a PowerPoint. I handed it to you. I have no way of knowing what any of you have looked at. We received no response back from Fish and Game, the Commission, or the Department. They are not restoration in the sense that they are not returning the system to a condition prior to disturbance. The current proposal would create a tidal connection similar to that one found 2,000 years ago when the wetland area was completely open to the ocean all year round.
Ms. McPherson, your time is up. Do you want to wrap up real quickly, please?
Yes, thank you. What we have is a false premise that has been distributed and used since a settlement agreement was reached with the Playa Vista development, Playa Capital, back in 1990. This false premise has been being forwarded by the department, by the Army Corps, who had a permit at that time, all of which these issues need to be vetted, which is why we're asking for we would like to see this DEIR taken back, fixed and recirculated and include a historical alternative that is, includes a seasonal freshwater wetland.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Lamb.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Walter Lamb. I'm representing the Ballona Wetlands Land Trust. And just to respond to a couple of comments, you know, I agree. None of this is ever personal. We appreciate your time. Frankly, these, you know, meeting after meeting after meeting isn't sustainable for anybody. I flew myself up to Sacramento. Now, you know, we've driven up to Atascadero. Next month, I'll be driving up to San Diego. Trust me, I'd rather be doing things. I think you guys have a lot of important work you'd like to do. I do want to say, though, in terms of the passion that the stakeholders have, yes, we do. We appreciate that that's been noticed. Sometimes that comes across a little bit like a backhanded compliment, that because we're so passionate, that we couldn't possibly be dispassionate in our analysis of facts. This is a $139 million ecosystem. The restoration will be, I think, close to $200 million. I'm going to go right to the facts. That's what I hope you'll notice, and not, you know, whether or not there's a good relationship between the department and the stakeholders. The other thing I'll say is, in terms of any time, you mentioned a couple times, Director Bonham, that you were not sure how two things related. I'm always contacting your staff, and I never hear a response, like ever. And we did a summer camp. You talked about access. We did a summer camp this summer for disadvantaged kids. We couldn't get into the Ecological Reserve. So somebody in your chain of command made that decision. The same time we wanted to get in and weren't able to, another organization that's always very supportive of the department's policies, we're able to get a far fewer number of kids in there. So that's the kind of thing that sometimes I think creates a little bit of tension. Now let me go to this. This is a really good slide because it's about facts. When we analyze facts, we're very dispassionate. We understand, we do a lot of research on the law, we do a lot of research, we compile lots of documents. No way in 5 minutes will you get all the information, frankly, that you need. I hope you'll read the presentation, some of the information that was given to you. But the red, let's just start there. That's the 80 spaces right now for employees of private shops and restaurants across the street. That is our understanding of why the first ever multi-story parking garage is proposed for this ecological reserve. Of all the ecological reserves in the state, I know I've never ever gone to hike somewhere and parked in a garage, you know, and then gone down like an elevator and then done my hike. So I don't think that's actually like a new thing in science. I think that's being proposed because there's a special interest that wants that parking. These were always intended to be temporary. And I think most importantly, the department promised in 2005 to analyze the compatibility, right? Because these were always meant to be temporary. And they just never did, never. And so the Fish and Game Commission actually says, unless there's a more appropriate use, and I don't believe the department has ever even considered a more appropriate use, such as, you know, a place for camps. Let's keep going here. So these are the lots, right? There's no mystery here about the lots. You can count up the spaces right on Google Maps. You see there's actually a lot of parking around there, and you can see the parking across the street from the Ecological Reserve parking is empty, and that's often the case, okay? And you can see other parking things. You know, I probably won't have time to get into that. Again, you can see the two lots. Now, the lot that's on the Ecological Reserve, those patrons, so the county pays $1,608 a year. That's about 6 cents per day per parking spot. Across the street, it's $15 per day. So that's a lot of, you know, the economics of this, right, is that the department, frankly, has been taken to the cleaners. And there are actually laws about how you exchange services between the state and the county, constitutional laws. So that's not something we'll be able to get into today. Just quickly on the draft DIR, congratulations on getting it out. We know it was a lot of hard work. In software, I've worked on big, long projects. One of my jobs was to make sure we didn't code ourselves down into a dead end. I do believe that this draft DIR has no viable path to a final EIR. I do think you'll have to redo it. That's my opinion. I know you have a different opinion, and it does come to the range of EIRs. I don't think your bookend theory is actually consistent with the law on that. But again, I just want to read, there's existing parking area leases to the county. These are not typical, but we've kept them on because they came with additional land to us, but they were terminable by the state. Those will be analyzed in our restoration plans as to their compatibility. That never happened. Okay, so we waited 12 years. That's not in there. And in fact, the draft AR doesn't even indicate what is the purpose and need of the first ever parking garage in an ecological reserve. No purpose and need. It just says this many places for beaches and harbors, this many for CDFW. The sheriff, by the way, is in a completely different parking lot. And then it says 273 spaces for the public. And I happen to know that that means people to go visit Marina del Rey. I happen to know that they want to put a hotel on some of the parking that I showed you that's in the county, and that's what's driving this. I know that because I've done the research. And I frankly think you're not getting enough information from your staff, or somewhere it's getting lost in the, because this is all factual stuff.
So, Mr. Chairman, again, I'd ask you to wrap up,
thank
please.
you.
No, you can wrap up if you want to just conclude.
Okay, well, let me just go very quickly through. Please read these slides, these emails, okay? Discussions about building a parking structure. This is 2011 in connection with the development of Fisherman's Village. In connection with the development of Fisherman's Village. That's what it is. And then you see they talk about not wanting the environmental groups to get wind of it. So then with this next email, jump to 2013. This is after the notice of preparation. This is after the scoping meeting. This is after everyone submitted their comments. Then there's a conversation, a side conversation between the department and the county to say, what do you guys want to do to this land?
I'm sorry, I meant for you to just wrap up, not to go into more of the
sorry.
slides.
So I just want to, I'll end with that. That's simply not, you just can't do that. It's confusing to us why somebody thought you could. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lem.
My name is Kathy Knight. I'm with the Ballona Ecosystem Education Project, and I also work with the Airport Marina Group Sierra Club. And we would like a consultation with your group in the future to talk about this issue. It's really, really important. I and most of the people in this room here have been on this issue, have been volunteering our time for over 25 years to save this land. And we're volunteers. We spend our own money. I spent $25,000 of my life savings to pursue a Supreme Court case on the bluff of Ballona, and because nobody else wanted to donate anymore. And that case was won by the Supreme Court, and it became a law in California now that if something's going to impact the coastal zone from outside the coastal zone, the Coastal Commission can now view it. But unfortunately, they didn't stop the developer, and it got destroyed, the bluff. But we did win the case. But it's a kind of, I mean, I could go on forever, but there's a kind of sacrifice that we make, these grassroots people, with our time and money to save this land. I want to say this is one of the last large freshwater wetlands on the Southern California coast. Bolsa Chica and Malibu have been turned into more brackish, fresh saltwater wetlands. And there's a lot of endangered species that live at Ballona, and we want to see it saved and restored as the freshwater wetland it is. Ballona Creek used to flow into it seasonally, and we're launching a campaign to start looking at the Ballona watershed. We had a bus trip that went up there and saw where it started at Ferndale Park up in there. And we want to bring it back, clean it up, bring it into the wetlands. It'll be a lot cheaper in terms of restoration to bring the water back into the wetlands than all this bulldozing and things like this to make it into the saltwater wetland. And the proposal now, as Patricia said, is very connected to the huge Playa de Vista development. It's basically a flood control project for them to protect them against tsunamis and sea level rise. And it'll have huge berms, and the berms will be where they'll have to probably kill any animals that want to live in the berm, because that would just, upset the berm. So the whole thing is really, really, really a terrible proposal, and we can't believe there is nothing for a freshwater wetland. Let me see. So we would like your support to ask for a freshwater wetland alternative to be addressed. It's terrible that there's not a single freshwater alternative being proposed. And ask for a 120-day extension for comments, because the EIR is, the document is 8,000 pages. And again, we're citizen people that have to look at this. There's already a lot of free parking in terms of the parking already over there. And we would ask, okay, and the gas map shows what Patricia was saying, the gas study that we finally got done, that she and our expert, after years and years and years of being told by the Playa Vista paid consultants, $1 million consultants, we didn't know what we were talking about. We finally got this study done that showed we were right. So this is where the gas is in the ecological reserve. And the parking garage, 3 stories high, doesn't belong there. It'll have places for motorcycles And it just is not needed. There'll be a levee built behind it with the coastal impact of blocking the view of the wetlands. It'll be about 40 feet tall. And sorry, I thought we were going to talk about things separately, so my notes are harder to review. This is also a registered sacred site of the Tongva indigenous people, and I think we need to respect that. You know, this place is a treasure. It shouldn't be bulldozed and dug up and changed. It's a treasure, and we should restore it carefully and slowly and thoughtfully. And the freshwater wetland would bring back the frogs to this area. The frogs used to be so out there in this area that Playa Vista had to close the doors one night when they had a PR meeting about their development because the frogs were so loud we couldn't hear the speakers. I mean, this is how much of a freshwater wetland that this place is. And
Please wrap up if you would.
okay. So we would ask that you support a freshwater alternative and oppose the 3-story parking lot on this wetland that's not needed, and help us ask for a 120-day extension.
And each speaker has 3 minutes, please.
Hello, my name is Jocelyn Enevoldsen, and I'm here with Heal the Bay. I'm their Coastal Resources Coordinator. I'm here today representing a coalition of environmental organizations that joined together to show our strong support for the comprehensive, scientifically based restoration of Southern California wetlands. Back in October of 2015, we gave public comment at a Fish and Game Commission meeting in LA, introducing our coalition and the 9 principles of wetland restoration that we developed. And there's a handout of the
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Rick, will you start the clock, please? I'm sorry, please.
So these principles are basic tenets that a successful restoration should have, such as clear environmental goals which aim to bring back the natural processes and functions of healthy wetlands. 2 years later, our coalition has expanded to 17 organizations, and we're thrilled that the draft EIR and EIS for the Ballona Wetlands has recently been released. The steering committee of our coalition is currently reviewing the draft EIR, EIS, and we plan to submit comments. Since the draft EIR, EIS has only been released for about 2 weeks, we have not yet decided on an alternative that we support, but we do know that we want to see robust restoration of the Ballona Wetlands with a plan that's based in good science. We hope to see a functioning and healthy ecosystem that's resilient to climate change and that provides access and educational opportunities to all Angelenos. Unfortunately, the Ballona wetlands are neither healthy nor functioning well, and they provide very little public access in their current state. Doing nothing will only cause the wetlands to continue to deteriorate. Given the length and the highly technical nature of the DEIR EIS, we request additional time for review by the public. Specifically, we ask that the comment period be extended from 60 days to 120 days. Further, we'd like to ask CDFW and the ACOE to hold 2 additional public meetings during the public comment period, in addition to the one that's currently planned. There's a lot of community interest in the Ballona wetlands, as demonstrated by several nearly sold-out community education events our coalition is hosting this month. And I also brought a flyer with those public community education events. And we had a bike tour of Ballona Creek and the wetlands last weekend that was well attended and successful. Providing the community more time to understand and engage in the restoration plans and associated environmental review would greatly benefit the process. The steering committee of our Wetlands Coalition has submitted these requests in writing. We're ecstatic that the long-awaited restoration process for the Ballona wetlands is underway. We applaud the hard work of the lead agencies, and we look forward to working with you to realize the option that we think best meets the goals for a healthy and accessible wetlands. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to provide comments.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Honorable President and Commission members, I am Captain Joe Stephen of the Marina Del Rey Sheriff Station. I have been the unit commander there since 2014. And again, thank you for allowing me to speak. I authored a letter that I believe you all read on June the 8th, 2017. And I won't regurgitate the entire letter, but I did want to highlight a couple of points about my department's interest in the county lot, the lot that we currently use for employee parking. Marina Del Rey Station has been a partner with the Department of Fish and Wildlife since the state purchased the land, assisting them with security and safety in the wetlands. We do provide numerous resources in the wetlands on a weekly and sometimes daily basis, assisting Mr. R.C. Brody, who was the land manager there, with security issues that he encounters. We have done numerous sweeps with Mr. Brody and discovered quite a bit of felonious activity in the wetlands. But, you know, we also have taken social services in there with us and assisted many homeless individuals as well. So although this is not the jurisdiction of the County of Los Angeles, we do provide numerous resources without any compensation. The parking lots that we utilize, there's really no other option for the Sheriff's Department. I have 103 employees. We utilize the smaller parking lot at the end of the cul-de-sac, and to lose that would really, I'm not sure what chain of events would occur if we lost our parking, but it wouldn't be good. So there's really not a lot of available land in the Marina Del Rey, so I just don't know what alternative we have. Also, I just want to mention that the Department of Beach and Harbors does purchase a deputy from us at the tune of $190,000 per fiscal year to assist in the Ballonas on an as-needed basis. So just on behalf of my 100 employees and myself and the County of Los Angeles, we want to respectfully request that you continue to let us use those parking lots. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain, and thank you for your service, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Brad Falkenstein. I'm with Hornblower Cruises and Events in Marina Del Rey. Specifically commenting on the public parking, or excuse me, the lot across the street from Fisherman's Village where we operate. We are Hornblower as a company is a visitor serving company. We provide access to the Marina Del Rey Harbor through our multiple types of cruises: cocktail cruises, dinner cruises, brunches, and private charters. And this parking lot is critical as it provides parking for our employees, of which we have over almost 100, who help us provide direct access to the public, to the waters of Marina Del Rey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, honorable commissioners. My name is Jill Peterson, and I am the property manager of Fisherman's Village in Marina Del Rey for Pacific Ocean Management, who owns Fisherman's Village. Recently, I submitted a letter to your commission on behalf of Pacific Ocean Management explaining the reasons why it is so vital that we be allowed to maintain, continue to utilize, rather, the state-owned parking lot located across the Fiji Way from Fisherman's Village for our tenants, employee parking, and as we have done for many years. Fisherman's Village is a key waterfront attraction in Marina Del Rey. It's located on Marina's main channel. Many thousands of visitors come to our center each year to recreate on the water through our boat charters and our boat rentals that we provide at Fisherman's Village. The public also comes to shop and to dine and to generally experience and enjoy the beautiful Marina's waterfront environment. Maintaining and encouraging the public access to the coast is a key tenet of the Coastal Commission, and Fisherman's Village well fulfills this function. Our ability to allow our tenants' employees to park across the street in the state-owned parking lot is key to us as being able to provide suitable parking for Fisherman's Village. This is because the existing on-site parking at Fisherman's Village is inadequate to meet the parking demands of the center. If we are forced to make our tenant employees park at the center, it will cause members of the public to be turned away for lack of parking. While the majority of the state-owned parking lot serves the parking needs for the County Beaches and Harbors Department and the Sheriff's Department, Our ability to utilize some of this parking for Fisherman's Village business employees definitely allows for more parking at Fisherman's Village to be used by the visiting public. If our business employees are no longer able to continue to use a portion of the state-owned lot, the general public will suffer. This will be a negative impact to visitors seeking marina, waterfront, and boating opportunities. So if this parking were to go away, the coastal access goes away. Also, imagine the dilemma of the minimum wage employee who has been parking at the state-owned lot for years. What do? Either they find a new job or pay to park in the public serving lot at Fisherman's Village. This would particularly harm lower-income employees. And those employees who are able to afford the $15 a day parking charge at the county lot serving Fisherman's Village will now be reducing the available parking spaces for the general public. This would result in a lose-lose situation for many. For these reasons, we respectfully urge you to please allow the counties and our center's employees continued use of the state-owned parking lot. This will allow Fisherman's Village to continue its vital coastal function for the public. Thank you for your time.
I stand before you in the names of many people and members of the greater Marina del Rey community, both business and private citizens who have just now begun to hear about this issue. These individuals know the heartbeat of this community very, very well. They love the sea and they greatly value the Ballona Wetlands. They respect and care about both. That's why I'm here today. I'm here to speak for all the silent majority who want to make certain that all people have access to the water while respecting the wetlands. These two goals are not polar opposites, but do require your thoughtful consideration when making decisions that affect either or both of these vital elements. My name is Patricia Eunice, and I have worked in Marina del Rey for almost 30 years now. I know this parking well very, very well. I know the issues regarding it. I know why it was constructed in the first place and why it has been so respectfully preserved and valued for all these years. The presence of this parking lot assures coastal access to the millions who visit Fisherman's Village every year. Fisherman's Village has limited parking. It was never believed to be able to accommodate the residents of the Los Angeles and visiting areas as much as it does today. It is the best opportunity in Marina del Rey for public access to water, and the vast numbers of visitors who want to go to the water to get to see it, go to Fisherman's Village. This is where low-cost water taxis, harbor cruises, all kinds of fishing, whale watching, all takes place at Fisherman's Village. This is exactly what the Coastal Act is about. Public access to the shoreline and the coast. That's what it's about. Respectfully, to take an action that would effectively upend this access is contrary to what the Coastal Act not just requires but demands. This is why your prudent and thoughtful consideration in this case is so critical. The vast majority of the public at Fisherman's Village arrive by car. There's nothing we can do about that. That's how they get there. Without the land leased from you, the employees of the county, beaches and harbors, and the sheriff's station, as well as the employees of the Fisherman's Village businesses, will be forced to park in the Fisherman's Village lot. That reduces the access for the public to use those spaces. Thank you.
My name is Michael Tripp, and I work for the Los Angeles County Department of Beaches and Harbors. My department manages Marina del Rey along with 24 miles of coastline. And I'm here today to talk to you about the leases that we have for 2-year parking lots in the Ballona Wetlands. The reason that my department is interested in maintaining these leases is because our main mission is to maintain and expand public access, and that's what we use these lots for. In the case of the sheriff's lot, I think that Captain Stephen made a great presentation about why that one's necessary. I want to talk to you about the other lot. That lot's used by Fish and Game staff, along with staff from my department, Beaches and Harbors, and employees from Fisherman's Village and a restaurant called Shanghai Reds. The reason that we would rather have our staff and employees parking in this lot rather than across the street in the public lot is because we want to maintain as much public parking as we possibly can. We've been doing this since the 80s, and we've been working specifically with the Department of Fish and Wildlife since 2003. It's been a very mutually beneficial relationship so far. In addition to the rent that we pay on the lots, we also help them maintain the wetlands. We've had several occasions where we've used our resources, our work crews and our trash trucks to go into the wetlands and help clean them out of, some of the things that people have dumped in there and, the homeless encampments. And, we really like this relationship. We want to continue it. I remember hearing earlier about the amount of money that we're collecting. As Director Bonham said, it really is a small amount. Basically, we get $6,800 from Fisherman's Village and Shanghai Reds to operate these lots. This is at best recovery of cost. More realistically, it's costing us more than that to maintain the lots. And so it's not about the county trying to make money. This is about the county trying to keep as much public access as we can. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'm available.
Thank you.
Honorable Commissioners and staff, Marcia Hanscom. I chair the Sierra Club Ballona Wetlands Restoration Committee, and I'm the official spokesperson for the club on Ballona Wetlands Restoration. I'm also the executive director of the Ballona Institute. I was in Governor Gray Davis' office in 2003 when he was in the process of a recall election, and we discussed whether or not we were going to be able to get the Ballona Wetlands, this 600-plus acre land, into public ownership. We had the money. It was all set aside. State parks wanted it. Fish and Game didn't want it. But in order to make it happen before the recall election, in case he was recalled, which he was, we had to go through the Fish and Game appraisal, and we were told it will be in Fish and Game, it will be transferred to state parks. Mary Nichols promised that that was going to happen no matter what. And then we had a pretty big fiscal crisis in our state. And so in the absence of funding for Fish and Game, and for state parks for that matter, there was pretty much absentee land ownership there for some time. The first couple of years, we did have this wonderful staff person you still have on staff. I think he's in Northern California now, Brad Henderson. And he worked his best to try and involve as many stakeholders in the public as possible. And some of us had access at that time to take tours, to do some restoration. And then, again, money just dried up and we didn't have anyone for a while. It really wasn't until the Annenberg Foundation promised a bunch of money and gave a bunch of money to the department for a pet center on the land, which thankfully has been withdrawn and put in a more appropriate place, that more staffing came. And this area is being characterized in the draft DEIR as totally degraded. All the things the developer said of Playa Vista when they wanted to have a reason to develop it. And there are 7 species on the federal or state endangered species list there. There are dozens of species on the state list of species of special concern. Those species have never been talked about when the plans were made for what would happen there. What species are we managing for? So the entire premise of this draft DEIR is off base, and we do need an extra 120 days for reviewing this lengthy document and all of the implications thereof. But public access, which has been talked about, has really been held hostage to this plan. We could open up a couple of gates and, just like at Bolsa Chica, have a walk path right now today. So I hope you will work with us to do that and give us extra time for review of this EIR. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, or is it afternoon? My name is Robert Vanderhook, a wildlife biologist, and Huey Johnson, the former Natural Resources Secretary of California, has called me a political biologist recently. A former executive director to you, Valerie, Bob Haidt, under Gray Davis when he was governor. He was influential in how we became purchasing the land, and as Marcia said, we were there at that time in the governor's office and I was the Sierra Club representative at the time. I'm not with the Sierra Club now. I'm with the Ballona Institute. So we drove to Bridgeport and met with 2 commissioners and there was a vote later that day, and it was unanimous, all 5 commissioners, because of the 2 that we influenced or asked for assistance on, and one of those commissioners was a Sierra Club member and involved, and we got an ecological reserve designation, much larger than what your department wanted to have and recommended. A slight correction to you, Mr. Bonham. George Bird Grinnell is from the eastern U.S. and was a game hunter and a promoter for wildlife conservation, but he's not Joseph Grinnell of UC Berkeley, who's written all the game and wildlife books on and cadre of students that have gone out to help your department and work for your department in the early years. I could speak about the white-tailed kite as an example, but Fish and Game Law in 1930, without an Endangered Species Act, that kite, that bird, raptor, has more protection than any other bird in the state of California because of that 1930 ruling, because then other rulings of environmental laws just add on to that, but it's got its separate, it's sort of like the Bald Eagle Act of the United States. You have the white-tailed kite kind of law of California. It's at Ballona, for example. So can you put the image of the parking lot? I only have a few moments left. Well, I'll just say that your department's been doing an interesting job with 6 different areas of parking lots. One is at the Laguna del Rey Apartments, that's not on the screen. One is at the baseball fields of Area A with 100+ parking lots, spaces, and here. And at the top of your photograph is, above the word Area A, is an area that has a few cars in it, and it's kind of a parallelogram shape. That's where your fish and game trailers are, and there's a white building at the far upper part right there where the arrow is. That's where your fish and game trailer is, and no cars are allowed to park in there except your state cars, your warden cars and volunteer wardens and et cetera. The public can't go into that parking lot. That's 20% of the whole place we're talking about on Fiji Way. And so the state of California, you've already done an excellent job in taking back 20% of that and said the sheriffs can't park their cars there anymore, and they're private boats. Okay, so by the way, with the Sheriff Department and the Pacific Ocean Management, the parking lot at Fisherman's Village is way larger than it's ever filled by cars. So there would be plenty of opportunity, and Beaches and Harbors is already parking their cars in other designated spots, and the sheriff has its own parking lot on the other side of Fiji Way that they could have that for only their cars and not have Beaches and Harbors staff park there and instead park down the road. So there'd be no real inconvenience. More discussion needed.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Great. With no further speakers, Commissioner Williams, do you want to lead us off, or do you I have a few comments after you do?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Just briefly, I know we've been on this topic for a long time, and we got a long agenda today, and we'll probably be talking about this more in the future. So I think this has been helpful. I want to thank you, Director Bonham, and your great staff who's working so hard on this to get this right, and appreciate all the input that we've received today. I know I've asked a few questions about this topic in the past, and trying to put this in the right bucket so that we understand what we're really doing here and what's really being discussed. I mean, there is the EIR and the long-term restoration of this property that is separate and distinct from the Commission's current regulatory role, which sort of bleeds into it only to the degree right now as it relates to this parking structure and the petitions that have been before us. So getting this update and kind of in terms of where we are with the EIR and the restoration and how that kind of layers over with our regulatory responsibility is helpful. As I've said in the past, my concern is that we don't tie our hands in terms of what ultimately happens with the long-term restoration, because even though we don't have direct regulatory role in that per se, we have an interest in what happens with the property in terms of its ecological value and the impact on the resources, the natural resources that we have there. So I just wanted to just say thank everyone for their participation, thank the department, and look forward to having continuing discussions about it.
Great. Yeah, I think Anthony said, Commissioner Williams said most of what I'd want to say, which is, just thank you all for your passion about this. I don't think passion and thoughtfulness are separate issues. And I don't think the director meant that. I think that when passion comes, it means that people care deeply about the facts and the issues around it, and we appreciate all sides of this. We have a deep interest in restoration and in conservation and in habitat, as we've talked about on other issues today, and we have great faith that the department is managing this process well. It is worth noting that a lot of what the speaker spoke about today is really not something that we have any role in. There are 2 petitions before us that we're going to hear in December on specific regulations that affect projects like this and others, because it's general regulations. And so we look forward to that discussion in December.